大家好. In Chapter 11, we're going to talk about promptness and tardiness. 我们的第11课的生词是第一，早上，早上；第二，下午，下午；第三，晚上，晚上。And four, the difference between the adverbs 就 and 才. The distinction between 就 and 才 is actually subtle but very important in Chinese grammar. They're very common adverbs. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about 就 and 才 in the latter half of this video. So this is going to be an extended video. If you're not interested in the details of the grammar, feel free to skip that section. 我们的第一个生词是早上，早上。And of course, earlier in this level, we learned the word 早, which means early, right? So 早上 is literally really early. Opposite of 早上 is 晚上，晚上。Again, we learned a word 晚 earlier in the level. 晚上 is really late. Really late. There's a third one called 下午, 下午, which you learned previously in level 6, which describes the afternoon. So taken together, we have 早上, 下午, and 晚上, which kind of covers all of the times of day. Now, there is technically a little bit of a distinction between the word 早上 and a word we learned before called 上午. 上午. 早上 really refers to something that's really early, right? Something that's really early, versus 上午 could kind of refer to any part of the morning before 12. Really means noon. So anything before 12 is 上午. So usually 早上 refers to something that's earlier than 上午. But in practice, it's really not that different. The adverb 就 is used to indicate earliness or promptness or briefness. Like all adverbs, it's used before the verb in the structure subject plus adverb plus verb plus object, right? It's describing the action of a verb. And this, 就 is the opposite of the adverb 才. We learned 才 in level 6. Remember, 才 is used to describe the lateness of an action. So, for example, 我昨天预习中文，早上4点才睡觉. So, I was practicing Chinese yesterday. I slept at 4 in the morning. So, at 4 in the morning, only then did I sleep. 早上4点才睡觉. So what if I want to say I slept promptly? I slept early. I want to use 就. 你也睡得很晚吗？不对，我昨天10点就睡了。I yesterday at 10 had already slept or slept promptly. So that's this person slept at 4 in the morning. This person slept yesterday at 10. 早上4点才睡觉 versus 昨天10点就睡觉了. All right. When do we use 就 and 才? We're not using them to communicate the fact, right? The fact doesn't change. Either you slept in the morning at 4 or you slept at night at 10. But you want to use to indicate kind of your personal feelings. This person really slept late. You want to emphasize the lateness. Or this person really slept early. You want to emphasize the earliness. Right? It's either earlier than expected or later than expected. Let's look at some more examples with 就. 他明天7点就 得上课. He has to go to class as early as 7 tomorrow. 我们8点看电影，他7点半就来了. So we're going to see the movie at 8, but at 7:30 he had already come, right? 他7点半就来了. He came as early as 7:30. Let's look at another example. 8点上课，小白7点就来了. So typically class starts at 8, but 小白7点 as early as 7就来了. What about little Zhang? 8点上课，小张8点才来. Class started at 8, but 小张, 8点半才来, didn't come until 8:30. So this person, 小张, came later than expected. Let's look at another example with speakers A and B. So both of them are returning home at the same time. 5点回家. But for speaker A, returning home is early. Typically, speaker A returns home later. So you would say, 我昨天5点就回来了. I returned home earlier than I expected. 5点就回来了. Speaker B is returning home later than expected. Maybe he typically returns around 3 or 4. So he would say, 我昨天5点才回来. So lateness and earliness is kind of in the eye of the beholder. It all depends on each person and their expectations. When you want to talk about a past action, Joe and Ty are not always used in the past. But when they are, Joe is always used with le, and Ty, as we learned in level 6, is never used with le. Let's look at some examples of that. 我来得很早，我8点就来了. So this is taking place in the past. Remember, this is the verb plus de plus adjective structure. I came really early, and at 8, as early as 8 had already come. This person says, 他来得很晚，他10点才来. He came really late. Only at 10 had he arrived. And there's no le in this cai structure. So whenever you're using the word cai in the past, there's no le. Let's look at another example. 弟弟10点就睡觉了. Little brother at 10, as early as 10, had gone to sleep. 哥哥12点才睡. The big brother only slept at 12. 我昨天傍晚才睡觉. I yesterday at midnight, 傍晚 is midnight, or 半夜, sorry, 半夜 at midnight, had only slept. But let me do it again. Let's look at another example. 我昨天半夜才睡觉. 半夜 means midnight, so it's yesterday at midnight. Only then did I sleep. 今天晚上我想9点就睡. Today I hope to at 9 to already as early as then go to sleep. Okay, let's look at some of these. Okay, let's look at how we use 就 and 才 in practice. So this person is sleeping yesterday. And typically, 平常 she sleeps at this time. 11点45. But yesterday, she slept at this time, 1:15, 1点15. So if I want to say I usually sleep at this time, but yesterday I slept at this time, how would I use 就 or 才 to describe sleeping yesterday? In this case, I would use 才 because if you notice, the time she slept yesterday is later than expected, right? She usually 平常11点45就睡觉了，但是她昨天1点15才睡觉。I usually sleep as early as 11:45. 但是昨天 yesterday I went to sleep later than expected. I had only gone to sleep at 1:15. Let's look at another example. 我吃饭。这个人平常8点就 well, this is more like 7点40吃饭，但是昨天7点30就吃饭了。So what would we use 就 or 才? Well, 昨天 she ate earlier than expected. So we would use 就 because it's earlier than expected. 我昨天7点半就吃饭了 and then there's a 了 afterwards. 我吃饭了。Let's look at a final example. 来学校 So these kids 我们几点来学校？我们平常8点来学校。昨天我们7点来学校。So if I was going to describe coming to school yesterday, would I use 就 or would I use 才 or would I use 就? Am I coming to school earlier than expected? 就 or am I coming to school later than expected? 才. The answer is 我平常8点来学校，但是昨天我7点就来学校了 because it's earlier by 1 hour. And that is the difference between 就 and 才。我昨天7点就来学校了。And again, we have the 了 at the end, so it would be 我7点就来学校了。我7点就来学校。我昨天7点就来学校了。All right. And that is my in-depth explanation about how to use 就 and 才. I hope that was helpful. 谢谢大家。